Welcome to Beginning, Middle, End, Ferndale Public Library's new adult Storytime series, a curated collection of fiction read and performed by its writers and other special guests. For this first edition, Josh Malerman will read from Malorie, his highly anticipated sequel to Bird Box. Michael Zadoorian will read from his new novel, The Narcissism of Small Differences, and Kathe Koja, that's me, will read from my story collection, Velocities. Right now, as a society, humans are in an unprecedented place. But we keep looking forward, imagining what the next steps might bring. Which brings us to this edition's theme. Welcome to the new place.
Hey everyone, I'm Josh Malerman, the author of Bird Box. I hope this all looks writerly enough for you. The glasses and hat, the shirt and jacket, the pants and boots, the treat. This is a writerly treat. And the book in my hand. The book in my hand is the sequel to Bird Box. This is Malorie. And it takes place about 12 years after the first one ends. And why not start at chapter 1? Tom is getting water from the well. It's something he's done every other day for the better part of a decade, the three of them having called Camp Yadin home for that long. Olympia believes the camp was once an outpost in the American frontier days. She's read almost every book in the camp library, more than 1,000, including books on the history of Michigan. She says the camp lodge was most likely once a saloon. Cabin 1 was the jail. Tom doesn't know if she's right, though he has no reason not to believe her. It was a Jewish summer camp when the creatures came, that much is for sure. And now, it's home. Hand over hand, he says, taking the rope that connects cabin 3 to the stone lip of the well. He says it because, despite the ropes that tie every building to one another, and even link cabin 10 to the H-dock on the lake, he's trying to come up with a better way to move about. Tom loathes the blindfolds. Sometimes, when he's feeling particularly lazy, he doesn't use one at all. He keeps his eyes closed instead, but his mother's never-ending rules remain firm in his mind. Closing your eyes isn't enough. You can be startled into opening them or something to open them for you. Sure, yes, in theory, Malorie is right. In theory, she usually is. But who wants to live in theory? Tom is 16 years old now. He was born into this world, and nothing's tried to open his eyes yet. Hand over hand. He's almost there. Malorie insists that he check the water before bringing it up. She's told him the story of two men named Felix and Jules many times, how his namesake Tom, the man, tested the water the two brought back, the water everybody was worried could be contaminated by a creature. Tom the teen likes that part of the story. He relates to the test. He even relates to the idea of new information about the creatures. Anything would be more to work with than what they have. But he's not worried about something swimming in their drinking water. The filter he invented himself has taken care of that. And besides, despite the way Malorie carries on, even she can't believe water can go mad. Here, he says. He reaches out and touches the lip before bumping into it. He's made this walk so many times that he could run it and still stop before the stone circle. He leans over the edge and yells into the dark tunnel. Get out of there! He smiles. His voice echoes. The sound is a rich one, and Tom likes to imagine it's someone else calling back up to him. For as lucky as they are to have chanced upon an abandoned summer camp with numerous buildings and amenities, life gets lonely out here. Tom is the best, he hollers, just to hear the echo. Nothing stirs in the water below, and Tom begins to bring the bucket up. It's a standard crank made of steel, and he's repaired it more than once. He oils it regularly, too, as the camp giveth in all ways, a supply cellar in the main lodge that brought Malorie to tears 10 years ago. A pipeline that delivers water directly to us, Tom says, cranking. We could put it exactly where the rope is now. It passes through the existing filter. All we'd have to do is turn a dial, and presto, clean water comes right out to us. No more hand over hand in the rope. We wouldn't have to leave the cabin at all. Not that the walk is difficult, and any excuse to get outside is a good one. But Tom wants things to improve. It's all he thinks about. The bucket up, he removes it from its hooks and carries it back to cabin 3, the largest of the cabins, the one he, Olympia, and Malorie have slept in most these years. Mom rules won't allow Tom or Olympia to sleep anywhere else despite their growing needs, a rule that Tom has so far followed. Spend all day in another one if you need to, but we sleep together, still a decade in. Tom shakes his head and tries to laugh it off. What else is there to do? Olympia has told him in private about the differences in generations that she's read about in her books. She says it's common for teenagers to feel like their parents are from another planet. Tom definitely agrees with the writers on that front. Malorie acts as if every second of every day could be the moment they all go mad. And Tom and Olympia both have pondered aloud, in their own ways, the worth of a life in which the only aim is to keep living. Okay, Mom, Tom says, smiling. It's easier for him to smile about this stuff than not. The few times outsiders have passed through their camp, their home, Tom has been able to glean how much stricter Malorie is than most. He's heard it in the voices of others. He saw it regularly at the school for the blind. Often it was embarrassing, living under her thumb in public. People looked at her like she was, what's the word Olympia used? Abusive. Yes, that's it. Whether or not Olympia thinks Malorie is abusive doesn't matter. Tom thinks she is. Well, what can he do? He can leave his blindfold inside. He can keep notes and dream of inventing ways to push back against the creatures. He can refuse to wear long sleeves and a hood on the hottest day of the year, like today. At the cabin's back door, he hears movement. On the other side, it's not Olympia, it's Malorie. This means he can't simply open the door and place the bucket of water inside. He needs to put that hood on after all. So many little dalliances, so many quirks of his mother's that get in the way of him existing on his own the way he'd have it done. He sets the bucket in the grass and takes the long-sleeved hoodie from the hook outside. His arms through the sleeves, he doesn't bother with the hood. Malorie will only check an arm. The bucket in hand again, he knocks 5 times. Tom? Malorie calls. But who else would it be? Yep, bucket 1. You will gather 4 buckets today, the same number he always retrieves. Are your eyes closed? Blindfolded, Mom. The door opens. Tom hands her the bucket over the threshold. Malorie takes it, but not without touching his arm in the process. Good boy, she says. Tom smiles. Malorie hands him a second bucket and closes the door. Tom removes the hoodie and puts it back on the hook. It's easy to fool your mom when she's not allowed to look at you. Hand over hand, he says, though really now he's just walking alongside the rope, bucket in one hand. Malorie's told him many times how they did it in the house on Shillingham, the house where Tom was born. They tied the rope around their waists and got water in pairs. Olympia says Malorie talks about that house more often than she realizes, but they both know she only talks about it up to a point, then nothing, as if the ending of the story is too dark and repeating it might bring it back upon her. At the well, his arms bare below the shirt sleeves, Tom secures the second bucket and turns the crank. The metal clings against the stone as it always does, but despite the contained cacophony, Tom hears a foot upon the grass to his left. He hears what he thinks are wheels, too. A wheelbarrow pushed past the well. He stops cranking. The bucket takes a moment to settle. Someone's here. He can hear them breathing. He thinks of the hoodie hanging on the hook. Another step, a shoe. Dry grass flattens in a different way beneath a bare foot than it does the solid sole of a shoe. A person, then. He does not ask who it is. He doesn't move at all. A third step, and Tom wonders if the person knows he's here. Surely they have to have heard him. Hello? It's a man's voice. Tom hears paper rustling, like when Olympia flips pages while reading. Does the man have books? Tom is scared, but he's thrilled too. A visitor. Still, he does not answer. Some of Malorie's rules make more sense in the moment. Tom steps away from the well. He could run through the cabin's back door. It wouldn't be difficult, and he'd know when to stop. In his personal darkness, he's all ears. I'd like to speak to you, the man says. Tom takes another step. His fingertips touch the rope. He turns to face the house. He hears the small wheels creak, imagines weapons in the barrow. Then he's moving fast, faster than he's ever taken this walk before. Hey, the man says. But Tom is at the back door and knocking 5 times before the man says another word. Tom? Yes, hurry. Mom, hurry. Malorie opens the back door and Tom nearly knocks her over as he rushes inside. What's going on? Olympia asks. Mom, Tom begins, but there is a knock at the front door. The door is thin and old. Malorie has expressed worry before. It isn't enough to stop anything or anyone from coming in. It's a man, Tom says. But Malorie has already tapped him on the shoulder. He knows what this means. He knows also that Olympia received the same tap. Tom doesn't speak again. Hello in there, the man says on the other side of the cabin door. I'm with the census. Malorie doesn't respond. Tom thinks of the rustling papers he heard. A barrel full? Do you know what the census is? Malorie doesn't respond. Tom thinks he might have to do something. If the man tries to break the door down, he's going to have to do something. I don't mean to frighten you. I could come back another time, but it's hard to say when that will be. Malorie doesn't respond. Tom knows she won't. He wants to ask Olympia what a census is. I just want to talk to you. However many are in there, it could save lives. Malorie doesn't respond. What does he want? Tom whispers. Malorie grabs his wrist to quiet him. So what I do, the man says, I go around gathering stories. I gather information. I know quite a bit about failed attempts at trying to look at the creatures. I know of successes people have had in terms of living better lives. Did you know there is a working train now? Malorie doesn't respond. Suddenly Tom wants to. Right here in Michigan, a train. And did you know there are more creatures now than before? Estimates say they have tripled since first arriving. Have you noticed more activity outside your home? Malorie doesn't respond, but Tom really wants to. What this man is saying is electrifying. Why not exchange information? Why not learn in the name of a better life? Why not? There's some evidence of one having been caught, the man says. Certainly people have tried all over. And now Tom knows why Malorie hasn't spoken. By her measures, this man is unsafe. Just the suggestion of capturing one must have turned her to stone, if she wasn't stone already. I have lists, the man says, patterns, a lot of information that can help you. And your stories, in turn, might help others. Please, let's talk. Malorie doesn't respond, but Tom does. Do you have that information written down? Malorie grips his wrist. Yes, I do. Relief in his voice. I have literature on me right here. Malorie grips his wrist so tight, he has to grab her hand to stop it. Could you leave it on the front porch? This is Olympia speaking. Tom could kiss her. But the man is silent for some time. Then, that doesn't seem like an even trade. I'd be leaving everything I know without getting anything in return. Finally, Malorie. Add us to the list of people who turned you away. Tom hears a sigh through the wood. Are you absolutely sure? It's not often I encounter a group. As you can imagine, it's not the most fruitful nor the safest endeavor. Are you sure you won't have me in for an hour, maybe two? Can I at least get your names? Leave us now. Okay. You realize I'm just a man trying to do good out here, right? I'm literally trying to give us all a better understanding of where we're at. Then further silence from within. Okay, I apologize if I scared you. I see I have. Tom's ear is cocked to the door. He hears the man leaving the porch, shoes on the cabin stairs, brakes in the dry grass beyond. The wheelbarrow pushes once more. By the time Tom is at the door himself, his ear to the wood, he can hear the man's steps diminishing, taking the dirt road out of camp. He turns to Malorie and Olympia. Before he can say anything, Malorie does. I told you not to speak, she says. Next time, don't. He's gone, Olympia says. But Tom already knows what Malorie is going to say before she says it. Not until we sweep the camp, he's not gone. Mom, Tom says, he's not Gary. Malorie doesn't hesitate with her response. Not another word. And wear your hood for Tom. Tom remains by the front door as Malorie readies herself to step outside to check every cabin in the camp. The man could be staying here, Malorie will say. He could be camping out in the woods, she will say. Who knows how long he's been watching them, she will say. And the name Gary will come up again, as it always does in times of trouble. But Tom isn't listening for what Malorie says or doesn't say. His ears on the soft rustle on the other side of the cabin's front door, as what must be a welcome breeze shuffles the papers sitting out there on the porch. The literature the man left behind after all.
Hi, I'm Michael Zadoorian. I'm going to read a section from my new novel, The Narcissism of Small Differences. Just came out from Akashic Books in May. And I'm going to read a chapter called The Detroit Way. And it takes place in Detroit, 2009. The protagonists of the book are a couple, Joe and Anna, who are kind of experiencing a couple's identity crisis at the moment. The Detroit Way. It was good to get out of the house. Cafe Limbus wasn't too crowded during the day, so it was a decent place to work. At night, it was filled for open mics, hoot nannies, and poetry readings. And during the weekend, there were popular vegan brunches, which Joe mostly avoided. Though he wasn't vegan intolerant like Chick, it was still a tad crunchy for his tastes. During the day, though, it was just crowded enough so you didn't feel like the only loser in the coffee house. By the time the waiter dragged himself from the huddle of smokers out on the sidewalk and loped over to his table to take his order, Joe had his laptop set up. Tall and brutally thin, the waiter had long, dyed black hair twisted into shanks and tufts of varying lengths. And of course, endless tattoos, all ink from fingertips to neck. Joe couldn't really distinguish what any of the tats were, but it had the effect of his body being turned inside out as if the guy were wearing arteries, capillaries, and tendons on the outside. It was many more tattoos than Joe normally preferred on a food service professional. He ordered a large black coffee, and the waiter disappeared in a vapor trail of nicotine fumes. A few minutes later, the waiter reappeared at the table with Joe's coffee. Besides the tattoos, he also had all the requisite epidermal punctures. Lip, nose, brow, cheek. It was a lot of hardware. Joe considered asking him if his face ever got tired of carrying that around all day. He thought of a book from the 50s that he had reviewed in Out of the Attic a few weeks ago called The Dud Avocado, where the main character, a young woman living in Paris, refers to a group of expatriate nonconformists as so violently individualistic as to be practically interchangeable. Was that why this guy looked so familiar? Then it came to him. "Hey man," asked Joe, "you in a band?" "Of course you are. Why am I even asking?" The illustrated man nodded somnolently. "Yeah, dude, I'm in a couple. The Stuckists and Merkins of Death." "Right," Joe said, nodding back. "Yeah, I've seen the Stuckists. You guys are really good. Didn't I just hear that y'all got signed?" "Yeah." He set down Joe's large Ferndale blend, then took out a cloth and smeared a small blotch of spilled sugar and coffee around on the table. "That's awesome. No offense, but why are you still waiting tables?" The waiter pursed his lips and cocked his head. "Gotta make a living, dude. I ain't no rock star yet." "Well, pretty close." "Maybe in Rotterdam, but not here." He gave Joe a smirk. "Anyway, I ain't gonna blow all my cash, then get dumped by the record company for not selling enough units. I know too many people that's happened to. So I work here when we're not rehearsing or touring. Keeps my head straight." Joe couldn't help but smile. "I guess you're right. Still, good for you. Congrats." "Whatever. Thanks. Need anything else?" "No, I'm good. Thanks." "Rock on." That last comment by the waiter was made at a level of irony that Joe almost couldn't hear anymore. Dog whistle irony was something that was happening more and more these days. Humor he couldn't quite laugh at. Cultural references that he just wasn't quite getting anymore. Was he getting to the point where he just wasn't understanding the younger generation? Ugh. Then there was the comment about how working in a coffee house keeps my head straight. So funny. This was one of the things Joe loved about Detroit. Even the creative folks, at least the ambitious ones, the people who are getting their work out there, their music or writing or art, hardly ever quit their crummy day jobs. The only people who did were musicians who had to because their bands were touring Europe all the time. Places like Berlin and Dusseldorf and Amsterdam absolutely loved Detroit music and pretty much everything to do with the place. Strange, to most of America, it was messed up Detroit, a forgotten manufacturing wasteland with decaying buildings and the murder capital of the nation. But to Europe, Detroit was the embodiment of uber-urban, echt-industrial, proto-apocalyptic, Rust Belt cool. At least it was for the extremely well-paying Euro culture magazines, for which he sometimes wrote about the Detroit scene. Europeans were way more hip to the positive things going on in Detroit. The music, the art, the history, the grit and spirit of the people. And even if they sometimes overappreciated the aesthetics of Blight, they at least understood the way the whole place somehow inexplicably got under your skin. Even if a Detroit band made it big here or there, you'd still hear them say things like, "I haven't forgotten how to deliver pizzas," or "I could go back to doing upholstery work if I had to." It was that twisted Midwestern work ethic, the factory rat DNA that threaded through Detroiters, embedded by generation after generation of immigrants who put their heads down and ground it out in a loud, grimy, windowless place for 30 or 40 years. Because that was just what you did. There weren't discussions about happiness or fulfillment or self-actualization. You shut up and you went to work because people were counting on you. Then, after all those great-grandfathers and grandfathers and fathers and mothers who toiled silently and often bitterly, came the spoiled generations after, the ones that went to college, that thought it was their right to be happy at a job. That was Joe, of course, who had deluded himself into thinking he could actually make a living as a freelance writer. He used to think it was okay not having that much money, always buying cheap beer and thrift store clothing. It was officially part of his lifestyle. It was part of Anna's, too, at one time. But now, here in his late 30s, being poor didn't seem like so much fun anymore. During his brief tenure at the Detroit News, he had developed a taste for microbrews and top-shelf booze. He started drinking above his station. He was also tired of saying things like, "I don't have a lot of cash right now, Anna." He was tired of being a mooch. He was getting the feeling that Anna was tired of him being a mooch, too. She had been making good money for about 7 years now, though it may have been longer. Lengths of time deceived him these days. A while back, he had started automatically adding 3 years to any casual estimate of elapsed time. Thus, if it felt like something happened 2 years ago, it was probably 5. If it seemed like 6 years ago, it was definitely 9. And these days, he had noticed that 3 years wasn't quite enough. He'd started adding 5 just to be on the safe side, which meant that Anna had probably been making good money for close to 12 years. Lucky thing for him, too, because by now he would probably be living under the 8-mile road overpass, cadging rumpled singles from passing cars, like the guys he would encounter coming home late from seeing bands at the bars in Hamtramck. 2:30 in the morning, there they were, with their 6 coats and 3 hats, their overstuffed shopping carts, and their greasy, creased, soft cardboard "God bless" signs, staring blankly at you at the traffic light. These days, Joe had been giving them the stray dollars that he'd find wadded in his bar pockets. He'd look them in their eyes, all roomy and broken, so not to seem like one of those people who didn't think of them as humans. He didn't like it, though, that time that one of them wanted to shake his hand. Joe did it, but he couldn't get the little bottle of hand sanitizer out of his glove box quickly enough once he was down the street. Which was another thing. When did he become one of those geezers with hand sanitizer in his glove compartment? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathe Koja, and I'm going to read to you from Velocities, my new short fiction collection, a story called Fireflies. "Look," he said. "Look at all the stars. Steep back steps, less porch than stoop, rusting wrought iron railing, and barely room enough for 2, but they had once been lovers, and so it was easy to sit touching, hip to thigh. His head back against the screen door mesh, looking up. On her right arm, a fresh bandage, white and still, like a large moth waiting with folded wings. "They look like fireflies," she said. Awkward, left-handed, she lit a cigarette. Without being asked, the man opened her bottle of beer, an Egyptian beer called Stella Star. He had just come back from Cairo. She was going somewhere else. "Fireflies?" he said. He had a kind of accent, unplaceable long vowels, sentences that curled up at the end like genie slippers, like the way they talk down south. One big backyard to have fireflies that size. Think of the grasshoppers, she said, and laughed, winced, dragged on her cigarette. The smoke rose in the darkness. It was very late. Or the dragonflies. Or the June bugs, he said. His own beer was almost empty. What'd the doctor say? She did not answer. The cement of the steps was damp, clammy against the backs of their legs, like a slab, a tombstone. And Esperson called, she said. He told me they were taking my paper. The vacuum one? Oh, honey, that's great. He pressed her leg, the bare skin below the edge of her cutoffs. His hand was warm, with long, strong workman's fingers, small hard spots like rivets on the palm, his skin a topographic map of his days. Cut wood, carry water, name and number and know all the plants in the world. Sometimes she imagined him out there in the green ether of the woods, any woods, mending a split sapling, testing the soil. He the earth, she the void. And when does it come out? He asked. When do you leave again? She asked. Where are you going? Montreal, he said, but not till December. Or maybe the new year, I'm not sure. It depends. Look, she said, one hand out, her left hand with its tubed coal of cigarette. Fireflies, look. Above the dark, drenched grass, a ballet of on and off. Little lights, delicate, sturdy, irregular. From the porch, they watched together in silence, a long, wondering silence. He put his hand on her leg again and squeezed, but absently. He sees us all the time, she thought, in the woods. Your paper, he said. Tell me what it's about, in layman's terms. Shifting a little on the steps, trying not to move her right arm, and basically, she said, it's about how most of what's out there, most of what's here, is vacuum energy. The cosmos is 1/3 visible and dark matter, 2/3 vacuum energy. He flicked away an insect, a mosquito, some tiny night-born pest. I thought nature abhors a vacuum. This kind keeps the universe expanding, she said. It resists the gravitational pull of the galaxies, and so... And what? She said nothing. What? Hey, are you okay? She did not answer. He looked into her face, peered through the darkness, then at once looked away, his own mouth twisting down one-sided, its curve, the felt echo of her pain. And, you want to go in? He asked, voice soft with alarm, his accent more pronounced. You want to lie down or? No! Harsh, fighting it, fighting herself. The hand with the cigarette trembled, its light like a firefly trapped in a jar until... The doctor, he said at last, when she had finally called. He called me. I'm still the emergency contact, you know. She did not answer. He said, I know what he said. She took a last drag, let the cigarette drop and rolled down the porch steps to the grass, dying red in a sea of silent green. We had a nice long talk. There are things you can do. There are still things that I'm not doing anything, she said. While you were in Cairo, I was doing things. And what good did any of them do me? I'm sick of all that. She reached for the pack of cigarettes, but her grasp was unsteady, and in her lurching motion, her right side, right arm struck the black iron rail, and she cried out, a brief, excruciating cry. And he moaned, low and helpless, a noise unwilled as he tried to right her, but no, she said through her teeth, no, don't touch me, don't. Silence. Night sounds. When her gaze had cleared, she saw that he was weeping Don't, she said, unsteady, and put her left hand on his arm, just above the elbow, the way she always had. It's okay, it's all right. But still he wept, face up toward the night, the wet, fierce glottals of a child, until, don't make it worse, she said, to make him stop, and he did, slowly, sucking in his breath, until, get us another beer, she said, to help him. When he had gone into the house again, she laboriously lit another cigarette, sat smoking in the faint noises from inside, water running, the glass clink of bottles. The fireflies were back, as if her pain and his had scattered them like the shadow of some dark beast. But now in the beast's departure, they were free again to play, to go about their amatory errands, and it's the males who light up, he said, back to the porch stoop, handing her a fresh beer. They do it for the girls, to get them to notice. It must work, she said, or there wouldn't be fireflies. Wonder if it's the same up there, pointing with his own beer into the starlit sky. Light matter and dark matter, you said? Like blinking on and off? No, she said. And the vacuum, it's what keeps them going, right? Keeps everything going? Expanding, she said. It increases the rate of expansion. Like this, he said, and touched not the bandage, but the skin above it, so lightly it was almost no touch at all. And she stared at him through the dark, breath gathered and astounded and furious, hurt, but before she could speak, you're expanding, he said, aren't you? Getting more diffuse? Like a plant does with seeds, like these trees right here, poplars, when their pods split open and all the seeds float away everywhere. That's you. With your work and your articles and who you are. It just goes on. You go on. Resisting the pull, right? But like poplars out there, pointing at the darkness, with the big fireflies. She said nothing. Her throat felt full and tight, like a seed pod. Big poplars, he said, big seeds. Neither spoke. Her left hand took his right, their fingers linked. Finally, read my paper, she said, when it comes out. Okay? Read it for me. He squeezed her hand, squeezed it slow and twice, and yes, he said, I will, but I won't understand it. You understand plenty, she said. A breeze touched the leaves of the poplars. Past them, past the porch, the fireflies moved. In the stars and the breathing night.